day or two. So I'm here representing Department of Revenue. There's a handout. It's August revenues and year-to-date collections. We'll go through that. On the first page is the August 24 General Revenue Fund collections. And these General Revenue Fund collections that I'm mentioning do not include $78.5 million that we borrowed from Rainy Day Fund. We do that cash flow every year. And it does not include $12.9 million that came from the income tax refund reserve account that came through pay refunds this particular first 2 months of the year. We plan on paying both of those back sometime in September. So those are temporary monies that came in. The overall collections for general revenue in August were $398.1 million. The estimate was almost $409 million. So we were $10.9 million below estimate. We were 3.1% below the prior year. And among the components, sales tax did quite well, $166.2 million versus 162.1 estimate. That was 4.5% ahead of last year. Personal income tax was a little on the slow side. In August, we collected $145.4 million. That was $10 million below estimate, but it was 3.1% ahead of last year, and we had a very good month for income withholding taxes, which were up 6.4%. So it was the non-withheld areas that were down a bit from the estimate. And we still have people who are filing their annual returns on extension for 2023 tax year, and there's still some adjustments associated with that tax cut that are going in place there. The next two, the B&O tax, the severance tax, both came up short of estimate in the month of August. Particularly the severance tax was $12.6 million below estimate and 38.4% below last year. These two taxes, the B&O and the severance, are due on the last calendar day of each month. August was not a favorable month. The last calendar day was the 30th. And a much larger than expected carryover occurred into early September, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Corporate taxes were about $1.1 million above estimate. August is not a big month for corporate income tax. Insurance premium tax continues to do well. The tobacco tax also lagged estimates by $1.1 million, 13.4% below last year. On the other hand, interest rates are very high. A lot of cash in the bank, including revenues have been appropriated for major capital expenditure projects, but maybe those projects haven't been expended yet. So that leaves pretty good cash balances and high interest rates. We're 6.2% ahead of last year, and interest $8.6 million above estimate. Moving on to the next page, it's year to date as of August 30th. I used August 30th because that's when the month ended, not August 31st. In year-to-date, $726.2 million in collections. We were $13.1 million below estimate and 2.6% below last year. Again, the sales tax is pretty much on estimate, $258.9 million, about $2.1 million above estimate, 2.5% ahead of last year. The actual growth rate is greater than 2.5%. As I mentioned last month, we have a provision in the code that accelerates sales tax and personal income withholding taxes that are due in July back into June. And that acceleration, which was much greater than normal this past couple months, and that resulted in the lower year-to-date growth rate on the sales tax. Personal income also affected by that, $281.2 million in collections, $26.1 million below estimate, 1.9% below last year. For the acceleration of withholding tax back into June, the personal income tax has actually been positive for the year to date. B&O tax is down 1.2% for the year to date. Severance tax, $13.9 million below estimate and 36.6% below last year. So on severance tax, I'll have a chart that will come up here shortly, but on severance tax, if we take that through the 5th day of September, it's I guess last Thursday, year-to-date severance tax is down 11.2%. So that tells me you got a lot of severance tax money in the first couple of days of September. So that 36.6 is much lower decline than should be. Corporate tax is $9.45 million above estimate. Again, the first major month for corporate income tax is September. So these are not major months. Insurance premium tax, particularly if you're paying auto insurance premiums, automobile prices went up significantly in recent years, and with that also goes automobile insurance. And higher insurance premiums means higher insurance premium tax. That's 2.7 million above estimate, 12.6% ahead of last year. Tobacco tax, we're waiting on the timing of cigarette stamp sales. That's down 13.5% after 2 months, but normally the decline rate is closer to about 2%. So we should see that close up a little bit in the future. And again, I mentioned interest income doing well, up 9.1%, 15.2 million above estimate. The next slide just shows if you look at the state budget website, they have numbers on compared to estimates, and on the website, those numbers would include the PIT reserve monies that came through, and with those PIT reserve monies in there, the year-to-date deficit was only $200,000. Those PIT reserve monies will be paid back in September. The next slide is a regular severance tax, where I measure it a little differently from the 6th of 1 month to the 5th of the next month. Take out the volatility associated with end of the month due date. And of course, we're down quite a bit from the peak of February of 23, back in late 22, early 23. Europe was worried about having enough energy for heating season. And we had the Ukraine war going on, sent natural gas prices through the roof. They've since returned much more to a more normalized state. And as of August of 24, we're down on a 12-month trailing basis, 387.2 million. But more importantly, you'll see that curve is starting to straighten out into a flattening. And in fact, August 24 collections were a little bit ahead, about 2% ahead of August 23 collections. That's the first time we've been several months we've seen the positive on severance tax. We expect severance tax to be pretty flat for this year compared to last year. Next slide is the August state road fund collections. And in August, we collected $79.5 million versus an estimate of $86 million for the state sources. That was $6.5 million below estimate and 65.1% below last year. Now, the reason why it's 65.1% below last year is last year in a special session, $150 million of one-time general revenue was allocated to the state road fund. That shows up in the year-to-date FY24 number of $162.2 million. $150 million of that is that one-time money. So take the $150 million out of the equation, and we're about even where we were last year. Motor fuel excise tax is another one of those taxes due on the last day of every calendar month. Those folks paid before the last day, and therefore the motor fuel excise tax, $32.8 million, was above estimate by $1.9 million, and compared to last year, up 53.5%. But that's just volatility associated with taxes due on the last day of each month. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. Registration fees were a little bit below estimate, but above last year by 10.2%. Sales tax on motor vehicles were a little bit below estimate, 3.1 million, down about 13% below last year. And the highway reimbursement component estimate was 83.5 million. We collected 83.7. That was above estimate and 23.5% above last year. And the last page that I have is the year-to-date numbers as of August 30th. Year-to-date on the state sources, we're down about 7.1 billion. And again, the big difference is last year, $150 million appropriation from general revenue to highways that has not occurred in the first 2 months of this year. The federal reimbursements above estimate and 22.5% above last year, with $155 million in reimbursements through the first 2 months, which by far is the greatest source of revenue for the state road fund for the first 2 months of the year. Motor fuel excise tax running a little ahead of last year's schedule, about 4.8 million ahead of estimate. That tax actually will be down a little bit this year compared to last year, because this past year we cut the tax rate by 1.5 cents due to a deflationary adjustment in the sales tax component. So that's going to lead to a little bit lower receipts this year versus last year. The registration fees first 2 months of the year are looking better, up 24%. Sales tax on cars down a little bit, but we have high interest rates. When those interest rates are likely to come down in future months. That may help stimulate additional car sales. With that, I'll open up to any questions you might have.
Question? If Senator from Kanawha County. Mark, it's not so much. Senator White, we got a microphone coming your way. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mark. Not so much on this, but 2 weeks ago in the Journal, there was an article on carbon tax and significant sales that are occurring in the Appalachian, especially West Virginia. How do we track any of that? And if so, what effect does that have on our financial statements?
You're talking about landowners leasing out rights on the carbon. They have to maintain a certain amount of forest or
Correct.
Yeah. Might show up a little bit in the property tax area with managed timberland, because I'm in the managed timberland business where I have to grow trees anyway. I would say that there's a good chance that some of those acres are tied up in carbon sequestration, but I don't have any data on hand myself as to what those are. I know the legislature has sought some this bill's proposed to address that one way or another. It goes around the country, not just West Virginia. I've heard arguments on both sides, but I'm not an expert on that.
Well, it was some pretty significant dollars that were referenced in that article.
Yeah.
So
The landowners, certainly those dollars become taxable income, so it can show up there. But it would show up at the federal level on the federal schedules, and then we can pick up.
and then on another aside, so we have this trigger that has gone into effect. I'm assuming that goes into effect January 1.
Yes,
For our estimates, did they assume any additional cut in personal income tax?
they assumed some cuts in personal income tax that did not occur, and those official estimates, which came out before the legislative session, included 3 tax cuts proposed by the governor. One was to eliminate Social Security taxes completely. One was a child care tax credit. One was a low income refundable senior tax credit. You add those together, it's $49.7 million. The only one that occurred in those was Social Security, and the first is phased in over 3 years. The first year phase in is only $4 million. So that leaves about $45.7 million. 4% tax cut is right around $40 million on that first few months. So there's enough room to cover in the estimate.
Yeah, like it from the 98.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mark. With regard to the fully refundable tax credit on motor vehicles that folks will be able to claim on their state tax returns beginning next year, will the state get a report from the counties in advance of next year to help us understand the timeliness of those payments and what our liability will be?
The state tax department and the county assessors and county sheriffs are the ones that actually send the bills out, are working together, and they're also trying to get some support from DMV, which is ongoing. And there should be information provided between those parties that will allow the tax department to send out, I would call it the equivalent of a 1099. So I expect most taxpayers who timely pay their tax will get a 1099 indicating how much was paid that would be eligible for the tax credit. They would use that information on their tax return.
So we'll get a report sometime probably later this year as to what that.
My guess is sometime around the 1st of January, a little after the 1st of January, would be a report based on the taxes that were timely paid. The last timely paid date, really, for the most part, is October 1st. So there's folks that I think there was a little piece in Metro News on that just the other day. So as long as you get your taxes paid on or before October 1st for the year, we'll be okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Any gentleman from Montague County.
Mark? My concern is if you look at that tax on the automobiles as the counties, are we seeing the counties increase those taxes on those cars? Because it is a perfect situation as to where if you increase that tax on me on my car, which it was in my particular case, you don't say or notice as much about it because you're saying, well, state's going to reimburse that anyhow on the next year. Have we seen that across the state occurring much?
I would say no, because the counties and the tax part recommends using the evaluation. And I don't have the exact name of this report, but there's an independent report on values that's used to determine the values of automobiles. Now, it's possible that you see additional excess levies coming on ballots above normal excess levies, but that's purely voter driven. And if voters think that they got a good deal and want more government services at the local level, you can see that down the road a bit, but that's going to take time for that to develop.
And that in turn brings my second question in, is on those additional taxes, do we reimburse that at the state level, or is that something that the automobile owner has voted upon themselves and we're not reimbursing? All we're reimbursing is the base.
No, the tax that's reimbursed includes all the levies that are imposed on that property, but basically your bond levies, your excess levies, and your regular levies.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from the 38th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mark. Since you have that 9.1% increase in interest income due to, I guess, the increased interest rates, do you have any heads up on what agencies are going to be requesting for increased cost of doing business in this coming year to offset this increase that we're seeing in interest income?
Well, the interest income is income that the state earns on money that's invested. It's independent of what agencies' needs are.
Right, but I'm expecting that they're going to be requesting increases in their budgets because the cost of them doing business themselves.
The good news is that inflation has come down quite a bit to the point where the Federal Reserve is about ready to cut short-term interest rates.
Yeah, maybe half.
So the inflationary effect on the agency should be dissipated a bit. Might be where it was 2 years ago.
So I guess we don't know if there's going to be an increase.
The budget hearings don't start until September, October, and every year the administration goes through with the agencies on needs and that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Senator from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to carbon. On sales on that, when you're doing estimates, is there any way to predict if that's going to have a negative impact on revenues generated out of the forest industry?
My take is no, that the forest industry should be able to work, but that's just my take. But I think more work needs to be done with forestry and other agencies that are involved in that area to see exactly what that impact is and will be. My reading, especially on the managed timberland program, you're growing forests for many, many years before they're selectively cut. That's all part of the managed program. So it's possible you could have both going on at the same time and still be okay. But the devil's always in the details. That's an area that, again, from my area, where I said, I haven't really looked into. It's more of a forestry, economic development, environmental area rather than a pure revenue tax area.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Gentleman from the 57.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate your presentation. I get a little nervous when I look at the second page, and I think this is general revenue fund as of August, and there are only 3 taxes that are up. And those three are sales, which is good. That's a substantial fact. But the other two are interest income and insurance premium. Those aren't very big factors in the budget.
They're important, but the sales tax is probably a much more important source. In fact, I have the percentages there, how much each contributed the first couple months of the year. And I'll tell you on the overall estimates for the year, overall estimates. Overall estimates for the year, we are predicting sales tax to grow. And in fact, I think the sales tax will exceed estimate. The easy estimate only calls for 1.3% growth. Sales tax, I think, will be better than that. Personal income tax, we expect that to decline. And we got the second phase of the tax reduction going in place that are 4%. So that's no surprise. We expect that to decline.
On the personal income tax, now, it's my understanding that the number, I'm trying to figure out the numbers on that, but it's about 970 million in the first tax cut. And that the August trigger was 95 million. Is that those numbers?
The first 21.25% reduction was about $600 million on a full year basis. I'm gonna round the property tax. The property tax is going to be between 150 and 200 million on top of that, so you get to about $800 million. The additional 4% is going to be about 96 million spread out over 2 years, so only about 40% or so will be the first year in 25. And all that's embedded into the personal income tax estimate for fiscal year 25, which right now the official estimate is a negative 9.7%. So we expect that to be negative. We expect the insurance premium tax to be, we expect it to be negative, but the insurance premium tax is going to outperform and be positive. The B&O tax will be better by the end of the year. It's, in fact, it should be positive by the end of the year. Right now, the official estimate is negative. Severance tax should be neutral to positive at the end of the year. Right now, we have a 10.1%, but most of that is technical, relates to changes in local tax distributions from the prior year.
Does it seem like severance taxes are going to be pretty steady at this level?
We look for it to be steady, relatively steady for this year, with not a whole lot of upside and not tremendous amount of downside. And interest income, we actually forecast interest income to fall this year by about 45%. And that's because Federal Reserve is strict to cut interest rates. We should easily exceed that expectation because those interest rate cuts are coming slower than originally thought. We wanted to be a little conservative on that because last year that interest income produced 226.6 million for the state, which was a pretty good number. We're expecting lower numbers this year.
Now, they're added to the calculus of how much reduction we have in general revenue would be new major programs. And I think that we'll have several come online this year, Hope Scholarship and also third grade success.
Those are,
you have those estimates.
Those are programs that are being phased in, and the legislature has a finance committees have estimates on how much that's going to be. I've seen some documents on that, but those are being phased in and are incorporated in the budget for 25.
Well, it was suggested to me that maybe it would be as much as $360 million in new major programs. Have a number on
it. I don't have that type of number.
And what were the three taxes with Social Security?
Social Security is being phased in over 3 years, and the first year phase is only $4 million, pretty small. The child tax credit did not pass. That was about $4.2 million in estimated annual cost. And then there was a refundable expansion of the senior citizen homestead program that would have been about $8.5 million that did not pass.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? Senator from the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark, over the past few years, the governor's been pretty good about suppressing the revenue estimates that comes out from the legislature with controlling growth for government debt. On these estimates that you're comparing our actuals to now, would you consider this a suppressed estimate?
This was a realistic estimate developed back in November of 23 for the 25 fiscal year. Estimates came out from the revenue department, and those were accepted by the governor as revenue estimates. I might say that since fiscal year 24 turned out better than was estimated, we started the fiscal year out a little ahead. So we expect to have surplus this fiscal year above those estimates. A comfortable surplus, but not a surplus like you've seen in recent years.
And that's what I'm looking at now. If this is a suppressed estimate, if you're expecting surpluses, that what I'm hearing is, yes, this is suppressed estimate, because you're expecting surpluses,
We're expecting surpluses.
forecasting more than the estimate, correct?
Yeah, they were expected surpluses because the economic performance between November and June was better than anticipated. That's the reason why we're expecting surplus. So the baseline moved up a bit on us. That happens on occasion. We prefer it to move up than move down. Once in a while, it moves down. Then we have problems. But because these estimates, once they're developed typically in November, they stick. And there's a long time between November and the start of the next fiscal year, all the way through the end of that fiscal year. And things happen in between, things that are outside the forecast. So far, we have very stable employment. We have unemployment rate that's near record low. Our employment actually is growing a little faster than we projected because labor force participation has edged up a bit. That's good news for us. Actually, we're no longer less than labor force participation. We're Mississippi's taking over last place, but that's good. It's moving in the right direction. We're actually moving up, whereas the national average is moving down a little bit. But the economy performed better than we expected in the last 6 months of the last fiscal year. So that produces a higher baseline. And barring a more significant slowdown than we see happening this year, we should have a surplus.
So I guess what gives me a little bit of concern then on this, if this is a fresh estimate and revenue coming in is below estimates in consumer or personal income tax, it's not only below estimates, but I would say it's also below inflationary growth as well as the sales tax. So normally, would you agree that the indicators for our revenue or actual economic growth are the corporate income tax, personal income tax, and the sales tax? Would you say those are strong indicators of what our economic growth as far as outside of separate stuff? Because I know that's a roller coaster.
Yeah, those are very important taxes, important measurements of economic activity. We project the sales tax to grow. The sales tax, again, because the sales tax grew a little more than we thought back in November. We originally had a 2.5% to 3% growth target for sales tax for this year. And right now, only requires 1.3 to meet the estimate. That's because we had a little higher sales tax growth in the last fiscal year than we thought we would. On personal income, we were expecting declines there because you got a number of tax cuts that are phased in. The real first test month for income taxes is September. September is when the quarterly payments come in for both corporate income tax and personal income tax. Some annual return payments go as well. That's the first test month, but for the whole year, we are projected at negative 9.7 on personal income tax. It has nothing to do with income growth. We think the withholding tax will be in good shape with growth in that 5-6% range at least. That's normal good year on withholding tax. But because of all the various tax changes going in, that brings the number down. Certainly, if folks are engaged in efforts to reduce income taxes or to phase out income taxes, that's going to happen to the income tax. The corporate income tax has had a tremendous winning streak. Never seen a period, I've been around for a long time, of continuous growth. Fiscal year 17 all the way up to fiscal year 24. The higher interest rates and slowdown in the national economy should slow down corporate tax. So we're expecting negative corporate tax revenues for this year. Very conservative estimate, negative 31%, but it's not unusual for corporate tax to move by more than 20% on any given year. It's not an unusual movement. So far, we're down a little bit more than that, but again, first significant month for corporate tax is September, not July and August. July and August be a little fickle at times. We wait to see what the September and October, particularly September and October numbers look like, get a better picture for the fiscal year when those good numbers are.
Is it like that every year? So you said typically, I mean, so if the numbers are down relative to collections last year by almost 13% with corporate, I mean, it's comparing to the same year to date last year.
Yeah.
So last year, you could have said the same thing. So why wouldn't? it
We
be-
did say the same thing last year, and the corporate income tax continued to grow. But we were expecting that to turn at some point in time, and we've seen that. And again, just because July and August are in, those are off months. Corporations with odd fiscal years or some one-time payments come in July and August. For most corporations, the first month of this fiscal year that's meaningful in terms of payments is September. September's probably got a $60-70 million estimate, which is a lot greater than the total collections for July and August combined. So we'll get September numbers.
Okay. I'm just, I got some hesitation just on the, if you're looking at this consumer sales tax collections being less than inflationary growth. And if we're looking at corporate taxes compared to last year, I'm talking about compared to last year's numbers, not the estimates. And then governor's coming in suggesting another $110 million in reduction of revenue on top of revenue drop. Should this legislature have concern with that?
The sales tax is actually growing a bit more than inflation. The only reason why it's 4.5% growth in August, that's more than the general inflation. General inflation is running at 3% or less right now. The only reason why it's 2.5 year to date, again, is an acceleration program that was on steroids this past year, and we had a huge gain in sales tax in June, a huge gain in withholding tax in June. I think June personal income tax collections were up like about 17% over last year. And that's all because of people that are required to pay half of what they're supposed to pay in July back in June. That was put in place several years ago when the state had a tight budgetary situation. It was an effort to create a one-time revenue shift, which it did. The criteria for who gets to accelerate is non-adjusted for inflation. So if any taxpayer is $100,000 or more a month in average collections, they're required to accelerate. And as time goes on, that creates that even greater level of acceleration, which we saw big time in this particular past fiscal year. So that's purely a legislative instrument that's in place that drives that picture, and it creates problems for July revenues. And it's getting a little bit worse over time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Now before us will be Randall Reed Smith, Curator and Cabinet Secretary, the Department of Arts, Culture, and History, to talk about the arts, culture, and history and the local economic development impact. And hopefully he'll talk about being prejudiced about what's happened in Parkersburg. And I want to thank you all for coming to Parkersburg because as Randall, I think, can explain about our history. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good morning. The mission of the West Virginia Department of Arts, Culture, and History is to identify, preserve, protect, promote, and present the ideas, arts, and artifacts of West Virginia's heritage, building pride in our past accomplishments and confidence in our future. No one sees that more than you see it here in the Mid-Ohio Valley. As the chairman can tell you, there's a lot of pride in this community. In fact, there was a book written entitled Where It All Began by David McKay. The first 3 elected governors were from Parkersburg. Now, we all know the second governor was from Buchanan. He only served 1 week. And how interesting that history is going to repeat itself in a few months. Because as Arthur I. Borman, and we're sitting in the room named for him, Arthur I. Borman, our first governor, went to the Senate. And Farnsworth from Buchanan served for 1 week. Then the actual second elected governor became the third governor, which was Governor Stevenson. So you're sitting in history in this wonderful community. So let's get to the numbers. Statewide, West Virginia arts and culture sector. It is a $1.5 billion industry in our state. In comparison, agriculture and forestry is $400 million. And then the coal mining industry, of course, is $16.8 billion. But you see, $1.5 billion contributes to our economy. It's almost 2% of our GDP. We have 15,725 jobs. That's almost 3% of West Virginia's workforce that are arts related. The total compensation of those jobs is $957,960,000. So this has been a steady growth. I'm in my 19th year, and we've seen a steady growth. And as you have heard from the finance report, things go up and down, but we're on a big swing. So in Parkersburg and the surrounding county, the Department of Arts, Culture, and History supports local arts and culture sector through grants and services. By the numbers in Parkersburg and Wood County, since the late 1980s, and that's as far back as our records go, the Department of Arts, Culture, and History has invested $6,390,637 in Wood County through 358 arts and historic preservation grants. Funding for these projects is awarded to the department by federal government through the National Endowment of the Arts. That's matched by state funding through the legislature, and then matched again by the grant recipients. This means that for every federal dollar, that turns into at least $3, one federal plus one state plus one from the community. And usually that can go up to a total of $9 by what the community puts into that. This funding supports in this area arts classes, community events, construction projects, creative aging initiatives, full-time jobs, historic preservation efforts, PK through 12 arts education programming, local museums and art centers, local symphonies, middle school music programs, performances, small business, and of course the big STEAM adding arts to science, technology, engineering, and math. We have 17 grant programs at the department, and most of those grants are in counties like Wood County. The local impact. Arts events and historic sites encourage cultural and heritage tourism from within West Virginia and from the surrounding states. Audience traveling to another county to attend an arts or cultural event report spending an average amount of $61 per person at local business. That does not include the cost of the ticket or if they stay at a hotel. Audience traveling within their home county report spending an average of $29, almost $30 per person. And again, that does not include the cost of the ticket. Wood County organizations receiving the Department of Arts Culture funding reported serving the following in fiscal year 2023: 21,000 youth, 23,000 adults, 753 artists and teaching artists. Wood County includes 40 listings on the National Register of Historic Properties. Parkersburg boasts 32 of these National Register sites, including the following historic districts. Avery Street Historic District. In that district alone, there are 363 resources included in that district. Parkersburg High School. And please never let that beautiful building go away. It is a gem to our state. It's the Parkersburg High School, Washington Avenue Historic District. This includes 151 resources. The Julian Square Historic District includes 127 resources. And then downtown Parkersburg Historic District has 48 included resources. Other National Register resources associated with cultural tourism activities in Wood County include Henderson Hall, which is up next to Williamstown. If you've not seen it, you need to see it. Blennerhassett Island area, you all were there yesterday, and of course, Fort Borman. All of these historic resources are eligible for the 2 grant programs that we have through the Historic Preservation section. Funding recipients, organizations in Parkersburg and Wood County include the Actors Guild of Parkersburg, Arts Bridge, Downtown PKB Arts, Henderson Hall, Henry Cooper Log Cabin Museum, the Mid-Ohio Valley Symphony Society, which is part of the West Virginia Symphony, the Oil and Gas Museum, Parkersburg Arts Center, Wood County Historic Landmark Commission, and the West Virginia University Parkersburg Arts Foundation. It also includes funding for individual artists throughout the area and their small businesses. 7 properties in Wood County have received historic rehabilitation tax credits totaling $181,404. Carnegie Library, Avery Savage Bed and Breakfast, Van Winkle Castle, Wicks House, Corbett House, 2100 Dudley Avenue, and the Nellie Little House. Save the Music, as you're familiar with our Save the Music Foundation grant that we have, all 6 eligible schools are funded here in Wood County, especially Parkersburg. Blennerhassett was in 2021, Edison 2021, Hamilton 2021. Those are middle schools. Jackson Middle School was 2020, Van Deventer Middle School was 2021, and Williamstown High School was 2025. Right now, currently, Save the Music is in 156 schools. By August 1st, that is $6,240,000 worth of free instruments, instructional materials, bandstands. And this year they have added, they're going to send 17 middle school teachers from across the state of West Virginia to attend the big Midwest Conference, Music Conference, which is Chicago. That's $2,500 per person. So as you can see, everything is growing in not only Wood County, but in the state. So let's see what I have else to add. Oh, so let's talk about a few other things. Library facility. Thank you all. I got to thank you all really big time. This is the first year that there was that 10-year unfunded mandate for the library facilities grant was funded. We put $1 million to start. We had over $3.5 million in requests, but we were able to put $1 million out into libraries across the state of West Virginia. The state of the arts is very strong in West Virginia. We've seen a growth, especially in the last 6 years. We've had an increase each year from our federal funding through the National Endowment of the Arts. We're almost at $1 million a year in the partnership grant. We have to match that. You all have been very generous in matching that grant. So blessed are the brief. There you go. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for the curator? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
Thank you for coming. Now before us is Andy Neptune, Executive Director, School Building Authority of West Virginia, for a review other than his budget comment. You may go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here today. I hope everyone has had a great summer. I was asked to attend this meeting to update the status of the School Building Authority over the last year. Because of your legislative approval to Governor Justice's proposed additional funding, along with the normal SBA yearly appropriation, the SBA has been very busy. Currently, the School Building Authority is in 47 counties. If you'll look at the handout that I provided for you, overall, currently, the SBA has invested $269,500 with local contributions of $159,412,925 for a total of $435,682,425. If you note below that, approximately that brought 12 new schools throughout our state. That's phenomenal. MIP, which is major improvement projects.
SBA funded $22,256,513 with local contributions of $10,618,897 for a total of $32,875,430. Your multi-county statewide funding. So that is your multi-county technical centers, separate than a lot of your in-county technical centers. So the SBA has funded $19,473,901. Local contribution does not contribute to that because those are multi-counties and they don't receive local funding. They come to us directly for MIP funding. And then the overall needs funding, SBA has funded $234,539,086 with local contributions of $148,794,028 for a total of $383,333,114. As you see below, the SBA is currently in 47 of 55 counties, and the ones that are highlighted are the ones that we are not currently involved in. That's not to say that we weren't previously involved in, but currently we are not involved in those counties. I want to remind everyone that the SBA knew of that we started to look at our old formula for construction cost of building facilities. And it was not in alignment with what the current construction market was. So after an extensive evaluation, we determined that we needed to change our square footage funded allowance to meet the current market. This change reflected into a 47% increase. So elementary schools now are at $447 a square foot, middle school $442, high school $440. And beginning this month, we are getting ready to dive back into and review and update our quality and performance guidelines with input from multiple different individuals. So this looks to be an extensive study that we're preparing for. The purpose for this update is for our guidance to provide design standards. It's a key factor as far as our new schools are concerned. In our guidelines to provide materials to be incorporated into new school facility funding by the school building authority. So over the year, we have moved pretty fast, involved a lot of money, some changes internally that we needed to take care of. That's my yearly report as far as this is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Are there questions of the SBA? Questions? Gentleman from Kanawha County.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation of the numbers. Just quickly, you obviously gave the numbers per square foot on that's on new construction, correct? That's correct. A lot of buildings, I think counties come to you and they want to renovate or add on. Do you have any kind of number, or is that just too?
When it comes to the renovation side of things, then you're really getting into the material costs and the construction costs of day to day. And the bid process that's involved with that. So we don't have a standard for renovations are concerned, just where new schools are concerned.
So for asbestos, abatement and things like that, you just can't foresee. I know you gentlemen before you, obviously, Arch was talking about Parkersburg High School and the need to preserve that building and things. So if they would come and want to do some upgrades, or you could not put a number on that until
we receive that. Right, that's correct. But really, the county would receive that bid and would contact us concerning the cost of that.
Can you give us any indication or any idea of how many projects come to you like that, where they're going to add on or renovate versus new construction?
Obviously, yeah, the renovation side of things is a lot higher number. I don't have an exact number for those than when the new projects come. Obviously, because new projects could involve school bonds trying to be passed, things like that, major closures that are occurring. But I do know that renovations are an extremely higher number than obviously what those needs are.
So it's less expensive to build a new building than it is to renovate existing buildings.
Say that again, please.
So it's less expensive at $450 a square foot or $440, whatever, than it is to renovate a current structure or add on to it.
Well, it can be, depending on the site, or depending on the circumstance. But for example, a lot that come to us at times are HVAC projects, maybe roofing projects. So obviously, those are considered major renovations, obviously, but they would not exceed the cost of, let's just say, if a school wanted to renovate half of their process. You know, I think of Wayne County that was involved in moving an elementary school over to their middle school, but they had to renovate that. It didn't fall under new construction. So that cost would be high, but it does fluctuate concerning whatever their need is.
And one last question is that, they're again, going back to that per square foot construction cost, that does not include site preparation, such as Hoover was what, $30 million to just get the site prepped here in West Virginia.
That's usually correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Gentleman from the 87.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here. I have a question. I was looking, you're talking about the multi-county statewide funding and that there's no local contribution. And he said that was mainly technical centers. I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around that as why. Because if you have like a county with a technical center, they're going to do a local contribution. But if you have two counties working together, there is no local contribution. Can you explain that?
I can't explain that other than maybe previously, that is how code was designed as far as when counties shared. I think I just know that in the circumstances of in-county technical centers, that they will usually receive their county funding sources to that. Whereas the multi-counties do not. I can't explain why that is set up other than if it is a legislative situation, but I know that there's about 7 of those that are located throughout our state that we help fund those projects.
Yeah, it just seems odd to me putting the single counties at a disadvantage, where if you had a multi-county, when you, like you say, 75% of the students came from county X and 75% of the local share should come from that county and the other from the other one, to be fair. But you said that's not your policy. That's something that maybe in code.
I do believe that that is set up in code because I know that when that happened, it caught my attention early on. And I went over to visit the State Department, the folks that were in charge of the technical center. And I was like, how are these funding set up? And he instructed me that it was more that about how code was established a long time ago. And so it was set up with that concern. With that multi-county, that they are able to come to us for the funding, which could entail more funding from us per se than what a county could give their local technical center. So, that involves that as well. But we are only able to do that with all the counties.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman from the 72nd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Neptune, for being here. We gave an appropriation to use some additional funds back in the regular session of about $150 million, exceeding your normal allocation. If I remember correctly, in your testimony, that cleared the backlog for the needs, the MIP, as well as the multi-county. Plus, there was a little bit for some increased costs going forward. Your MIP project applications were due at the end of March after session. So my first question is, were you able to fund all the MIP projects, and is there a backlog? And my next question will be about the needs and how much you anticipate coming in the next week for that application.
Everything is funded, and it still is a great time for that. It's great to make those calls when you are able to catch folks a little bit off guard to say, by the way, we're going to go ahead and fund all of those projects. So everything is caught up. Concerning that with the funding that you all gave us. And I hope that I stood in both of your areas and said, thank you very much for that. Counties are just extremely happy with that. But we are caught up with that. We are caught up with that from March. And I want to say several months ago, I stood in front of the superintendents to let them know that I'm going to go ahead into your question, to let them know that funding was going to go back to regular numbers. Please be, cautious in considering what you want. Early indications is that we are going to have a high number still come to us for their circumstances. I know there are some counties that are involved with potential bond passing and some new schools that are out there. So when you look at that, you look at those overall costs, that could eat up pretty quick, that 51. But I do know that there are a lot of counties that are projected to be coming. They're due this Friday. Everything's due in Friday, but we're getting early, kind of like early balloting. So we get early mail-ins to see that they'll be coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Director. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, sir.
Now before the committee is Cynthia Pursley, Cabinet Secretary for the Department of Human Services. This is a continuation of conversation we had back in August in Charleston. Are there questions of the Secretary? Does the Secretary wish to make an opening statement?
I do not.
You have before you a packet that was given to you back in Charleston in August. Please review. If you have questions, she is here to answer them. All right. Senator from the floor.
Chairman Chris, I have Commissioner Bean with me who may be able to answer some questions better than I can. If with leave of the committee, if she could come up.
Well, we'll wait to see how, so let the co-chair, Senator from the fourth, ask questions of you.
Sure.
Thank you, Peter. Secretary. Just to follow up on from last time, I had a conversation about a couple of things. One was on surplus that Medicaid has, $219 million surplus. And you mentioned, well, that has to stay within the actual Medicaid fund, but you can roll it over into the coming year.
Yeah.
When, if you use that in funds that are otherwise appropriated, in lines that are otherwise appropriated, does it free up capital or goes it anywhere else that maybe could go outside of Medicaid?
So the question is, will it free up funds outside of Medicaid?
Yeah, so I realize it's a mix of state and federal dollars.
Yeah.
So if you go in and, you can transfer between some of the lines that you have within the department. If you were to use those funds to supplant state revenue that was coming into other lines into the coming year, does it free up capital that you can use outside of Medicaid?
So my understanding of the way that the line item budget was is that you did not want us to move Medicaid dollars to fund other things in the department, but certainly we could if the legislature gave us leave to do that.
Okay, so so there's more freedom, I think, than maybe the committee would have took the impression of from last time. Is the reason I say that. And this one's a little bit maybe outside of Medicaid, but it's something that I'd asked you about earlier, and I just want to see if the department's made progress on it. Is that when you presented to the Joint Government Finance Committee, it's in our last interims, and on those lines, we were talking about child care and where we actually fund it within it. Because when we went through those lines, couldn't find really anything that said anything about child care where it's funded. So I asked them to tell us which lines that we actually fund these from. Has the department made progress with that?
So childcare is actually funded by a mix of a number of different funding sources. The first is obviously state dollars, which we have a child care development fund, which is about 2.2 million. And then we are also required to have a child care maintenance of effort line. The federal government, when they give us block grants in particular, require us to keep our level of funding at the state steady. So it's called maintenance of effort, and that's pretty much on every federal grant and block grant that we receive. So we have a fund that is the maintenance of effort and match fund of 5.6 million. Childcare, we have also been funding childcare through the TANF block grant, which I told you about at our last meeting. The TANF block grant is an allowable expense for the TANF block grant is childcare. And we anticipate in 2025 spending about 41 million out of the TANF block grant. We also receive a social services block grant from the feds, and that's a very small grant, and that's about 96,000. And then we get the Child Care Development Block Grant from the Fed. This is the majority of funding that comes into the state for childcare. That's about 75 million. And so what we have in total in federal funds is 116 million that funds childcare, and we have about 7.9 million from state funds that funds childcare. So the total funding for state fiscal year 2025 with those two funding sources added is about 124 million.
Can you get to me or the committee, the actual lines that we fund in the budget that runs into these grants and these appropriations that you get through the department?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Because in the actual budget, these titles aren't there. So when we go to look at, if you want to appropriate more or less in a given line,
Sure.
we're trying to figure out where that is.
Right.
It's very obscured. So
Yeah.
just,
There are two funds in the state budget, child care development and child care maintenance effort. And they're 14400 and 70800 are the two budget lines that we
Thank you very much.
through the state.
All right. Gentleman from the 26th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your attendance today, Secretary. I have a number of questions, so bear with me. First of all, on our enrollment.
Yeah.
The unwind is done.
Yeah.
You've got basically 513,000 covered lives right now. Is that what the department would anticipate is about steady state to be once we finish the unwind?
We anticipated a little bit higher, and it was in fact at the end of the unwind about 516,000. But 512 is our August enrollment, and that is going to fluctuate month to month.
Yeah, but basically the unwind is
And
done.
the unwind is done.
Somewhere in that neighborhood's where we
Exactly.
anticipate
Mhm.
staying.
And that's what our state fiscal year 2026 budget will be built on.
That's what I was getting.
Yes.
So are you comfortable with the number that we built the budget at is about where the enrollment appears as though it's going to stay?
The 2025 budget, I believe, was built on 520,000. So we're in the neighborhood. Our 2026 budget will be built on whatever our average was after the unwind.
Okay. Now, I noticed you've got some very good trends here on your prescription drug.
Yeah.
Is that due, well, obviously part of it's due to fewer enrolled lives.
Sure.
Is it all due to that, or is part of it due to better management of our prescription drug program?
I think it's both. I think we have better management of our prescription drug program. We work very carefully with WVU, and our formulary is very tightly controlled, and our approvals for drugs are scrutinized. We also, and remember, pharmacy benefits are outside of the MCOs, so we are managing that completely, and I think we're doing a great job with that. The team is doing a great job. We also have done a really good job with making sure that we maximize the pharmacy rebates that we received for Medicaid programs. And so you see that our rebates were 89 million over our budget. And so we're maximizing those as well.
Now, I'd like to go to the long-term care reimbursement being
Yeah.
103 million over budget because, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've entered into a 3-year program
Yeah.
because our rates were frankly rather outrageous that we were paying for long-term care. So where are we at in that process, given the fact that we're $103 million over budget?
Right. So the 103 million over budget was for last year. The new rates begin on October 1st of this year.
Is there a reason we didn't sync those up with the fiscal year?
We have to go through CMS for approval on those. And so we have a state plan amendment in process for that. And that
You received this
October 1st. We are submitting it on, it's in the governor's office for signature. So October 1st is when we will start those new rates. We don't anticipate any difficulties with that spa. And if you recall, in the first year, of those new rates, as we phase in 25% of the new rate, 75% of the old rate, and then 50-50 in year 2 and 75-25 in year 3. We anticipate a $60 million savings in the first year, 120 in the second year, and 180 million in the third year.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, but that is our largest spend in Medicaid is long-term care.
Not sure. I could get the answer to that for you.
I'd like to go back to last interim in Charleston.
Yes.
And we had a rather discouraging presentation about the state of where we're at with substance abuse. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but compared to fiscal year 2019, where we spent about $13 million in our SUD waiver program. Leaving the fiscal year that just concluded, where we spent about 160 million. So it's 10x what we spent 5 years ago. And frankly, we got just a totally discouraging report that we've lost ground on every matrix. Now, I know you and I have talked a lot about this. Where are we at in trying to figure out how to go to a performance-based funding model? Because frankly, I don't think this legislature can take many more reports where we spent 10 times the money we spent 5 years ago. And the results across the board, the amount of substance use, the amount of deaths, the amount of overdoses, it just always worse, worse, and worse. So would you like to speak, or could you speak to where we're at and to really start to drill into some of these problems? Because I feel like we've just steadily lost ground the time I've been in this legislature and on this committee.
Sure. So if you recall last year, you passed legislation that caused Medicaid to begin looking at outcome measures for the largest expense within the SUD waiver, which is residential treatment. And so we have proposed those measures. We have worked with the managed care organizations on those measures. We believe that those are measures that are, first of all, that we can get the data for. And second of all, they are national measures that are indicators of success in SUD treatment. They are not, I think that when we look at SUD treatment with just overdoses as our end result, that's not truly reflective of the work that's being done in the SUD treatment world. So they also include making sure that when someone comes out of rehab, that they get a 7-day follow-up, they get a 30-day follow-up. These are things that the managed care organizations can manage. There are things like when people leave residential treatment, they are connected to housing and they're connected to employment, so that we are not just looking again at overdoses as the end result of SUD treatment, because quite frankly, people who are in treatment are less likely to have overdoses than people who are not in treatment. So those measures begin July the 1st. The data collection for those measures and the performance-based reimbursement will begin next year. That's how the bill was written.
Okay, another thing we did was we went to first day enrollment.
Yes.
In managed care. Could you speak to how that's worked?
Yes. So we, the first day enrollment, can I bring Secretary Bean up here just because I don't want to get the dates wrong?
As long as it's okay with the chairman.
It's okay with the chair.
We're short on time.
I know.
Delegate.
Okay.
We need to cut this off.
Okay. Okay.
Because the transportation to our next 2 meetings is happening right now.
Okay. Then I'll stand aside. You and I'll talk about the rest of this. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Announcements. They're voting for the operating engineer school at Medina being loaded now, and the trip to WDU at Parkersburg for the education portion. They both start at 10 o'clock, but the loading is happening now across the street at the hotel. There's not any other announcements, gentlemen from the board.
Mr. Chairman, we adjourn.
Gentlemen, we adjourn. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. All those opposed, like sign. Thank you very much.
You got one back here.
Thank you. Make sure.